Sorry, do you want it to just go? I thought it was going with Todd. There we go.
Well, yeah. Are you guys ready to get going? Well, welcome everybody. Does someone need to mute their line? I hear like a truck or something in the background. There we go. Okay, well, welcome everybody to this month's monthly program, ifmaKC. Welcome members and guests. There is our agenda, the presentation schedule. Let's see, announcements. I'd like to welcome Tina Schaus as our new 2021 Education Chair. So welcome, Tina. Woo! Is she on? Does she want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Oh, there she is.
Hope everybody's doing well.
We're trying to stay warm.
Yeah, ask her about the weather where she is.
I'm trying not to be ugly about where I am. That's why you don't see my face, because I can't get away from what's happening around me. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. But I am excited about being the new education chair, and I think you'll be seeing a couple of new announcements coming out in a couple of days about that.
Fantastic. Welcome aboard, Tina.
Thank you.
We're all excited. And thank you to our sponsors. Your continued support for our amazing programs and allowing us to kind of network virtually and everything else you do for us. We can't thank you enough. So here's to Delta Innovation Services, HL Restoration, and anyone from Delta HL here? Besides, I saw Ash, obviously, she's here. Dan or Steve from Delta. Also want to recognize Garmin and Hallmark and ServPro and Certified Painters, Herman Miller, Image Flooring, RUI Construction Services, and well, thank you again, sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. Our upcoming programs for 2021 is on March 16th. It's titled Getting Your Projects Approved, Partnering with Your CFO. And then in April, on April 20th, our program is titled Urgent Professional Takeover Series, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly of Facilities Management. So don't miss out on those two programs. And then today, the program is called Firsthand Update on the KCI Airport Project with the airport's Deputy Director, Justin Meyer. And to introduce Justin is Josh.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to all the IFMA members and guests and sponsors. I want to thank you all for joining us today. As Todd said, my name is Josh Woods. I serve on the programs committee for the ifmaKC chapter, and I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our distinguished guest and presenter for today's program meeting. I'm extremely excited that this day has come, and I know you all will enjoy hearing all about the new KCI terminal project. This project impacts all of us directly and indirectly in so many ways in our personal travel life and our professional facility management world. I know you will find our discussion today very engaging and enlightening. With that said, I want to introduce today's presenter, Justin Meyer. Justin is the Deputy Director of Aviation, Marketing and Air Service Development. So if you don't know what that means, I'll tell you, he's the man in charge and fully ingrained in this massive $1.5 billion with a B dollar project at KCI. Justin rejoined the Kansas City Aviation Department in 2014. He came to us from Florida. He leads the marketing, communications, and customer service efforts for the Kansas City Aviation Department's 2 airports. Additionally, Justin works with airline planners to increase flights and add new routes from Kansas City International MCI. Before I turn it over to Justin, I also want to introduce Robert Reynolds, who's my co-facilitator today. Robert and I will be fielding your questions through the chat and feeding them back to Justin at the conclusion of the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat feature and submit your questions, and we'll work to get as many as we can get answered through this 90-minute journey as we explore the friendly skies of KCI. And I just also want to say, due to many of us working from home and some of the challenges with today's weather and electricity challenges, we're not going to be showing any videos on today's broadcast that Justin had prepared for us. So he's going to link those in the chat feature so that everyone can access those at their own discretion. So please take a minute to mute yourself if you haven't already. And that way Justin can proceed uninterrupted as we go on this journey. So Justin, please take it away.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that introduction. Again, Justin Meyer with the Aviation Department, and really pleased to have the chance to take each of you through an update on where we are on the project. It's been a long time coming, and I'll take you through a little bit of the history as to how we got to where we are. And quite honestly, we're only about 2 years away from having this new facility open. One thing that I hope is a takeaway for each of you, and I know that people in your role are also probably pretty peculiar about calling things what they actually are. And so I will just share an early reminder that this is a conversation about the new terminal we are building at the airport. We are not building a new airport. In proper terms, an airport is comprehensive of the runways and taxiways and all the land that makes up the airport. We are quite simply building a new building, a new terminal. So that's me being particular there. But we'll kind of walk through a couple different things here. But I think first off, I really want to give you a little bit of background on the Aviation Department. So we are actually a department of the city of Kansas City, Missouri, but we are an enterprise fund department, which means that the revenue that is made at the airport stays at the airport. And we cannot use airport revenue to hire more police officers for the city or fill potholes downtown or anything like that. Likewise, the revenue fund dollars of the city of Kansas City, Missouri, that they make off of property tax and income tax, et cetera, those dollars don't come up to the airport. We are run like a business. So that's important to note. And that's the truth behind the whole campaign on the new terminal, where we are telling people that no, it's not run by taxpayer, funded by taxpayers. Airport projects and airports are run only by airport users. And we certainly used to have a lot more users than we have had over the last year, but we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the impacts there and what the path forward looks like. Across the two airports, the downtown airport and the international airport, we have about 450 employees total. And there is an interesting history between the downtown airport and the international airport, in that the Charles B. Wheeler Downtown Airport was Kansas City's only airport and was our first commercial service airport for years and years and years. It was actually dedicated by Charles Lindbergh in 1927. The airport was named Kansas City Municipal Airport. And again, it was our primary service airport. I have a picture here of a Continental aircraft that went a little bit long on the runway. No fatalities on this incident, but it was as the aviation industry and airlines kind of were thrust into the jet age, we realized quite early and quite quickly that the 6,500-foot runway, which is limited in length by the Missouri River, as well as the difficulties associated with the Quality Hill Bluff to the south, really were going to constrict Kansas City's ability to grow in its aviation program. And of course, aviation has a long storied history in Kansas City, with Trans World Airlines actually being headquartered in Kansas City from a lot of its early infancy. So in 1960s, it was decided that there needed to be a different place for our airport to grow. And that was to be identified in about 10,000 acres up in Platte County, Missouri, where there was nothing. No issues with relocating houses or highways or anything like that. Just a lot of farmland up in Platte County, Missouri. There was I've got a couple of visuals here of a 1968 campaign mailer that was sent out that is encouraging people to vote yes for the new airport. And this one was a new airport to be constructed and the 3 terminals to be designed. I called out one of these bullet points because the bullets are kind of interesting. They're actually supersonic jets. And the last bullet point on the back of that campaign mailer says, we will have the first from the ground up supersonic airport in the world. So congratulations to us. We have a supersonic airport that's also never had a supersonic departure. So that's kind of interesting. But again, as facility managers, I think it's not unusual to have something designed in a way that was a great idea in its concept, but certainly not a realistic idea in its execution. And quite honestly, that's the story of Kansas City International Airport and the 3 terminals that were constructed there, because it was really built for a time that didn't really happen. Not only did the supersonic jets happen, but the idea of drive-to-gate terminals where you could park your car right on the inside of this circle, as you can see here. Before the parking garages, it was just surface parking inside the horseshoes. Then walk across the curb right onto the aircraft, and in some case, ran if you would actually then buy the ticket, do the financial transaction. Then times were just really, really different in the late 60s and early 70s. I have a bullet point here that says state of the art for 26 days. And this is the craziest thing, again, for facility managers to think about how this facility went out of date so quickly. We opened on November 11th of 1972, but it was on December 7th of 1972 that the FAA told airports that they needed to begin getting in the business of screening passengers and their carry-on bags so that aircraft hijackings would stop happening. This is the headline of the Kansas City Star the day after we opened, so November 12th of 1972. 2 articles above the fold. The first one about the new terminal opening. The second and the larger story is actually related to the hijacking of Southern Airways Flight 49. Now, there were a lot of hijackings in the late 60s and early 70s. They weren't unusual. Southern Airways Flight 49 was significant in that the hijackers of this aircraft actually threatened to fly it into a nuclear testing facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, essentially threatening nuclear warfare against the United States, thus leading to the FAA's mandate to airports to screen passengers in bags. There's an interesting backstory that we don't have enough time for regarding Southern Airways Flight 49, and it actually ties back to 3 individuals protesting police brutality. And so I will just pause for a second to say it's so disheartening to me that the things that we've had to deal with as a society in the year 2020 when it comes to inequality of treatment of citizens, it's just a real shame. But again, the reason Kansas City International Airport was out of date in 26 days was because of the hijacking of Southern Flight 49. The inside of the facility, when we opened in 1972, you could see these little like minor barricades. That was all that was separating passengers in the gate areas from the public areas because the entire facility was open. So on as early as 1973, January 7th was the day that we had to have all of that stuff changed. And so we did. We created individual little gate clusters or secure gate areas where passengers would need to go through a magnometer and put their carry-on bag through a magnometer to make sure that there was nothing dangerous or unsafe with them on their person or in their bag. So when you think about the way that the terminals are designed now, when you think about where most of the restroom capacity is, it starts to make sense in that the restroom capacity and the concessions are currently in a place that you really don't have access to as a passenger. But when it was open and when it was designed, everything was wide open. But again, out of date in 26 days. We did do a major terminal enhancement project, a terminal improvement project in the late 90s, early 2000s, where we spent nearly $250 million taking all 3 terminals down to their concrete skeletons replacing those iconic parquet floors with the terrazzo floors, and doing lots of enhancements to HVAC, as well as including secure restrooms inside the secure areas. But that certainly wasn't enough to solve a lot of the problems that exist with the terminals. And one of the big drivers there, as you can see, when we opened the terminals in 72 with only 4 million total passengers, but reaching 12 million total passengers in the 2000s, and again in 2018 and 2019, really were causing us a lot of stress and causing our facility to fail in certain areas. And I think one of the things that became really helpful as we were talking to the community about why the facility wasn't working anymore, it really relates to the way that airlines have changed. The airlines at our airport have been really successful in doing a few things over the last decade, and those include learning or better maximizing their revenue and increasing load factors, or the percent of seats filled on an aircraft. Now, if you flew pre-pandemic, you kind of realized this because you remembered maybe 5 or 10 years ago when the middle seats were always open and you didn't have to fight over who gets the elbow space on those armrests. But you can see there by this chart that by 2019, airline load factors at Kansas City International Airport were up to 82% full. So airplanes were becoming more full. And not only were airplanes becoming more full, but airlines were also increasing the gauge, or increasing the amount of seats on their aircraft. By sometimes that's larger aircraft, or sometimes, quite honestly, it's airlines like Southwest figuring out that a plane that used to have 133 could have 136 and could have 143 seats as they take out galley space or lessen leg room a little bit. But just by the simple math on this chart, you can see that in 2005 at Kansas City International Airport, we were averaging 77 passengers per departure. But by 2019, that was up to 107, which means in every gate area, there's 30 more outbound passengers on average at Kansas City International Airport. That's 30 more people that may want a Starbucks and are now standing in line, 30 more people that might need to use the restroom right before departure. And so we were seeing a lot of issues come when it came to the capacity and the density of people inside the gate areas, that our customer service levels were failing quite seriously. And this is a familiar image to some of you that were traveling in the 2018, 2019s. This is Delta Gate 56, 57. And if Delta had an arrival from Atlanta on a 757 with 180 seats, and an arrival from Seattle on a 737-900 with 160 seats, when those planes land at the same time, there's 300 people trying to swim upstream through 300 people that are getting ready to board. And quite honestly, it became a major customer service failure. And we saw our customer satisfaction score increasing really significantly. In fact, Southwest Airlines, our largest carrier, publicly stated in front of City Council that they throttled back connections over Kansas City because it's such a poor guest experience for their travelers. So we knew that we had some issues that we had to solve. And certainly we had a community that was very opposed to change. That's, I think, part of our nature as Kansas Cityans is kind of this belief that things are good enough. But we did certainly have our fair amount of opposition towards the new terminal project. Congressman Sam Graves saying we don't need a golden palace of an airport. I agree. So that's why we are not building a golden palace of an airport. But there's a lot of opposition that came at us and called us liars and said that there really is taxpayers on the hook, even though through a pandemic they're still not. And it became really a sensational media story that was difficult to overcome. That bottom one, the 41 headline, KCI designers say is a redesign could attract terrorists. This backstory on that is actually someone that helped with the electrical installation in the original terminals in the 1960s and early 1970s, saw the new terminal and thought that the single security checkpoint was going to be a risk. So he went on record as a designer that would attract terrorists. So those are the kind of things that we were up against and made, which quite honestly made November 7th when the citizens of Kansas City voted 75% in favor of the new terminal, really gave me a lot of satisfaction that we were able to overcome those obstacles that were in front of us. So there's a little bit of a backstory on the airport, kind of how it got to where we are today and how we got to the project. But I'm going to jump in and take you a little bit through the project update. So following that November 7th vote, and actually even in the dates prior, the city had, if you remember the story there, in early 2017, local stepped forward and said that they wanted to build a new terminal for us because the city had kind of gotten in its own way. And so the city decided that sole sourcing a $1.5 billion project wasn't necessarily an ethical decision. So they put out an RFP for the new terminal project. The procurement process was comprehensive. The city ended up choosing Edgemore Infrastructure, who then partnered with Clark White's Clarkson to construct the terminal. So following the vote in November, there were a lot of public meetings that were held to make sure that the developer understood what the public wanted. And quite honestly, there's been some significant changes from what we were voting on to where we are now. The project is actually larger than we initially thought it was going to be. Initially, the concept was 35 gates. Then working with our airlines to make sure that we were going to build the right thing, airlines actually started clamoring and say they want a little bit more capacity. So the project certainly became enhanced through that kind of collaborative period that took place 2017 and 2018 before we broke ground in 2019. But like I mentioned, we're underway with a 39-gate new terminal facility that we're constructing. The two most important things you'll hear from me is that the project is on budget at $1.5 billion. In fact, we have tens of millions of dollars left in contingency, which is great, especially considering we're nearly 100% procured at this point. The project is also on time for a March of 2023 opening. The previous city manager and mayor gave us that deadline. Of course, the city of Kansas City is set to host the NFL draft in April of 2023. So we anticipate having this facility open by then. If you're not really familiar with the project location or you haven't been to the airport for a while, we've demolished Terminal A, which was one of the three horseshoes that were serving as terminals for passengers, and that is located due west of the air traffic control tower. And so the project is comprehensive, including those 39-gate new terminal facility, but also a 6,000 space parking garage, which roughly duplicates the amount of garage parking capacity we had in A terminal garage, B terminal garage, and C terminal garage if those were to be combined. This is probably a good spot to stop and just talk a little bit about what happens to existing infrastructure as the new terminal turns on in 2023. And all airport and airline operations will move out of Terminals B and Terminal C into the new terminal. There will no longer be airlines occupying space in Terminals B and C. Those facilities are quite honestly at the end of their useful life. They are constructed, of course, nearly 50 years ago now, but the construction material is exposed aggregate concrete. And in the late 60s, again, you as facility managers are probably familiar with some of the issues with exposed aggregate concrete, so this isn't news to you. But it turns out, despite everyone thinking in the early 70s that concrete would last forever, exposed aggregate concrete is actually quite porous, and when you reinforce it with steel rebar, you're setting yourself up for failure. So our facilities are truly at the end of their useful life. And if we were doing this in person, I would pass around about a football-sized chunk of Terminal A And you would note if you were passing it around to the person next to you that there's a massive amount of sand and residue that comes off in your hand just from touching it, as that material is degrading to a point that clearly, again, indicates it's at its end of life. The good news, though, as you saw from those two pictures, or that picture that I shared earlier, where showed surface parking inside the horseshoes, there is still life left in the parking garages, and we're going to reuse the Terminal B parking garage in a really cost-effective and customer service level way. So we're currently spending, the aviation department currently spends about $1 million a year busing employees to work from an employee parking lot, which is located north of this terminal complex, pretty close to the intersection of I-29 and the Mexico City exit. So we spend a lot of money on that, and we also, of course, require the employees then to allot plenty of time in their day to catch a bus, ride a bus on both sides before their shift and after their shift. And so the Terminal B garage is in close enough proximity that we will allow employees to use that as the new employee parking location, and we will not have to bus the majority of our employees, and they'll simply be able to walk into work like many of us do on a regular basis. So a significant quality of life enhancement, thereby reusing the Terminal B garage for employee parking. Terminal C garage, it's kind of out of the way. We're not really sure what we're going to do with it. But again, it has lots of life left. Maybe it becomes a location to store valet vehicles if we need that. But we also know that the Ford Clay-Como plan is always looking for lots to park F-150s. So maybe it ends up being used for some sort of additional source of revenue like that. But that's how it fits on the footprint. And we'll talk here a little bit at the end about how the roadway patterns changed, because you note that this is right on top of the way that if you haven't been to the airport for a while, you've driven right through where all this is being constructed now. So the roadway pattern has changed, and I'll wrap up with that at the end of my presentation. Here's a visual of the rendering of the new terminal facility. This one's pretty common. We've shared it in a lot of places, so hopefully it's not news to you to see this. But just to take you from left to right, there's that 6,000 foot park or 6,000 space parking garage immediately across the roadway from the new terminal. When we were doing those community outreach sessions in the fall of 2017, the number one thing we heard from the community was that the new terminal needed to be convenient. And when we would push as to what does convenience mean, because that's kind of a random word without a lot of definition, when we pressed individuals what convenience meant short walking distances to Kansas City. So we interpreted that to mean we wanted to condense as much as possible to allow the shortest count of steps for travelers through the facility. So I'm very pleased that in some of these gates that you see here in the foreground, the walking distance from a car in the garage across the roadway through the security checkpoint and maybe to this aircraft that's right here front and center, that'll actually be a shorter walking distance than what you would have today in B garage through the Southwest Airlines security checkpoint, and then kind of backtracking through that little gerbil tube to maybe like gate 45 or 46. Because while the horseshoe is only 72 feet deep, if you've flown airlines like United or Southwest or others, you recognize that the security checkpoint isn't necessarily in proximity to where your gate is, and there's a lot of walking, lateral walking back and forth that actually drives that step count up. So the parking garage is really close in proximity. The roadway there that you see is a double level roadway. So we're currently the largest airport in the United States that doesn't vertically separate arrivals from departures and separate from commercial traffic as well. So we will do that with a new terminal, where if you're dropping off or getting dropped off, you'll do that on the upper level roadway. Pickups will be on the lower level, where it's an easy walk out from baggage claim, which will be right there on that lower level down here. And we'll also take commercial vehicles, so rental car buses, hotel buses and shuttles, the Ride KC bus, and others will have dedicated commercial curbs underneath the parking garage. So just a simple step out of the arrivals level to access all of that underneath. And of course, those will all be covered. So in a snow day or a rain day, you'll be dry. And even on the departures level curb with this cantilevered roof line, that will extend out over the first 2 lanes of traffic. So people getting dropped off can do that covered from the weather. 39 gates here on Concourse A and B combined, but a connector in between the two with moving walkways in both directions for those passengers that are really concerned about step counts. So if you don't want to walk, that's fine. Walking is good for you, but that's fine. We'll certainly do everything we can here to make sure that the customer service levels are as high as possible. One thing that's also worth pointing out is the intentionality we had to designing this all on one level. There are some very minor sloped floors coming out of these central nodes in the A and B concourse, but for the most part, being dropped off on the curb to the furthest gate at the southern end of Concourse B, it's all single level. It's all the same surface level. So there's no significant vertical circulation to make it more difficult for our passengers, which I'm pleased about there. To dive in a little bit on the design status, we're done. The terminal's been designed, the parking garage is designed. On the procurement side, we're 99% complete. The only packages that are really left regarding the terminal construction are all related to final cleanup and touch up and stuff like that. So that's really all that's left. I'm really proud of the amount of work that's gone to local companies. The developer has also exceeded their ambitious MBE and WBE participation goals. So this is really a project that we all can be really proud of, not only of how it was built, but by who built it. This is a project that is employing lots of Kansas Cityans and people in the Kansas City region, and is going to really be something again that many of us can look at and say we were part of it. We do have a construction camera mounted on the air traffic control tower. So this is looking due west as the project. I think this was a couple days ago. But you can see in the foreground that parking garage construction is precast, and that's going up. Some of the pieces you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner. There's that elevated roadway in front of the terminal with the roadway on the lower level and elevated deck on the top level. You can see this is where the beams will connect that to the roadway. The new terminal head house is complete. In fact, we've finished and celebrated a steel erection and topped out just last month. So that was a milestone we hit just about a month ago and celebrated that with our workforce. There's still a lot of, you can see flooring in the head house to be done. The glass wall that will enclose the head house needs to be done. Glass in some of the nodes you can see there needs to be completed, as well as some of the glass on the north end of Concourse A and Concourse B. But overall, project is going really well, and again, really much credit due to the workforce that has figured out how to change what they do through a pandemic. And I'm really pleased to communicate that the COVID-19 pandemic has not slowed down our project. We've had to figure out how to work smarter. We've implemented lots of new technology to help manage contact tracing of inside the workforce on the job site, and to minimize groups working together, which is one thing for maybe a person driving a backhoe that's used to working together, or a person that's working in masonry that's used to working by themselves. But for a lot of our other jobs, it's been difficult to figure out how we can move this project forward while keeping the job site safe. On the procurement side, one thing that I'm really excited about is that we recently completed the procurement of passenger boarding bridges. So our 39 passenger boarding bridges, the bridges which are typically steel tubes that connect the airport terminal to the aircraft, we've actually been able to select at a very competitive price all glass passenger boarding bridges. And by all glass, I mean glass and steel. But we do know that there's a significant customer service enhancement and benefit in terms of guest ratings for those types of boarding bridges. So we're excited to become the largest airport terminal in the United States. I have a typo on this slide, I'm sorry. That will be an all glass jet bridge airport terminal. So that's something I'm really excited about. I'd mentioned topping out. We finished topping out. This wasn't the last beam, but was one of the last beams. So we ended up with 6,600 participants and raising more than $90,000 to allow people to virtually sign the beam. That was one of the beams that is included in the B node of the new terminal. So I was proud to be part of that to benefit, again, the local community and help partnering with United Way of Greater Kansas City in their crisis relief fund there. So maybe one of your names is on there, let me know if it is. And this is just relevant to the temperature being what it is these days, that even though the temperatures are extreme and a lot of our job work on the outside has stopped, we are enclosed enough that many of our trades are continuing to work even through the cold. Electricians, plumbers, drywall, etc. We do have certain parts of the terminal that are closed up enough that with temporary heat, we can keep the project moving. So really, really proud to be at that milestone. And speaking of milestones, looking at the next couple months, we'll by June of 2021, this summer, have air conditioning in the building, which I know that our crews will be excited about. We'll have permanent power by March next month. And you can see some of the other pieces of significant milestones that are ahead of us there on the project. Two big things I kind of want to wrap up with. As the largest single infrastructure in Kansas City's history, the 1% for Art program that the city manages is applicable to the new terminal project. So we will have millions of dollars that is going to go towards art in the new terminal. We've engaged with artists from the region and from the nation and from the world as to what some of the opportunities are. We are actually just completed our second open call for artists for our second set of 4 opportunities, and there will be 4 total opportunities. So we're about halfway through on those, and we'll begin working through the selection of finalists for the pieces that were included in that program. So all the information about the art program, if you think that you might have an interest in participating in some of our final calls for art, or maybe you know someone that you think their art should be showcased in the new terminal, all that information is at buildkci.com/art. That's the link at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side. But as a passenger, where will you see art in the new terminal? And the answer there is everywhere. So on the concourses, in the connector, I'm really excited in that the escalator to the baggage claim, this area in the check-in hall where passengers that have deplaned off aircraft and are heading down to the lower level, this is going to be a very high level atrium where the escalators are going down. And I actually got to serve on the selection committee for that. So we ended up with some really great artists for that part of the project. And they are going back and sharpening their pencils and will come back with specific proposals as to what they want to do in that space that we'll get to make selections on there. So the other thing I want to close on is concessions. And while we are mostly bid out on all of the construction for the new terminal, there are so many opportunities still left in the concessions program. We really think the concessions program will be what helps us make this new terminal feel like Kansas City, be it through local shops, local vendors, good Kansas City barbecue, and more. This is really going to be how we deliver a sense of place in the new terminal. Just as you think about other airport terminals that you've been through that really deliver much the same, I always think about Austin, Texas, which you feel like you're in Austin when you're experiencing their concessions program, and our goal is certainly to very much do the same. The concessions RFP just went out on the street last week, and concessions proposals will be due in June or beginning of July, I think end of June. All that information is at flykci.com/concessions. This is where I make a joke and say I do know that we will lose when it comes to choosing barbecue, being that it's the most contentious argument in Kansas City, that even if we choose your favorite, 10 other people are going to hate it or think we should have chosen the other one. So we're going to do our best, and I'm excited about how that will finish. No matter how it ends or which barbecue concessionaire wins, I do think the thing that we can find comfort in is knowing that it will be a significant upgrade from what we have today. In that, once you're through the security checkpoint, every concession is open to you, as compared to what we have today, where you're really limited only to the vending kiosks and maybe a sit-down restaurant, depending upon which airline you're flying that day. So it will be a significant enhancement to the guest experience for our travelers. And I mentioned I was going to come back and talk a little bit about the roadway, and so this is really that, and we'll kind of wrap up with this slide before we get into some questions. Is a reminder that the roadway has changed significantly at Kansas City International Airport, where you used to come inbound Cookingham and go in a counterclockwise motion around the around the air traffic control tower in order to create the parking garage space. We've had to close that road and create a new traffic pattern where inbound Cookingham bends to the left. There's 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, separated by a traffic divider. You do approach Terminal C first now, so that's a little bit different. And the Terminal C and Terminal B are both accessed via traffic circles. Actually, correction, roundabouts. The roundabouts are working great. We built them in such a way that the regular bus traffic and others, they're wide and easy to use. We've had no major traffic incidents to date. A reminder that if you're in a roundabout, there's really only 2 rules of roundabouts that you need to follow. The first rule of a roundabout is yield to traffic that's already in a roundabout before you enter a roundabout. And 2, once you're in a roundabout, don't stop. So if you can do those 2 things, managing the traffic pattern at the
hopefully you can. That's something cold right here too. Oh, you got some tap cons? Awesome, awesome.
And I'll wrap up with this last slide, which is just a reminder.
Hey, Becky, if you can hear this, can you please mute your mic?
I know, right?
So just a reminder that our last slide is, on this last slide, is that our website for this project is buildkci.com. We are posting multiple updates per week from the job site. So lots of pictures and status updates as to the progress that we're making with the new terminal. We're also across most of your favorite social channels, including Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as Build KCI. So would certainly love your engagement on those things. And with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing and see if we can do some questions.
Fantastic, Justin. I certainly appreciate all the information. Super interesting, a lot of local interest in your project. Really appreciate it. Have a few questions from participants in our session today. The first being, let's see, I believe we have one from, bear with me here, Dustin Holkenbrink. He asks, is there a link to the construction camera that the public can get a live look at?
There is not, and the reason for that is that the construction camera also takes in our most active runway. So if we had a runway incident with an aircraft, we didn't want to necessarily be broadcasting that to the world. So it is unfortunately not public facing, but again, on our social channels, we are regularly posting pictures and time lapses from that camera. In fact, I'll drop one in the chat box in just a minute for you to review.
Fantastic, that makes sense. Another question we had from Sam Davidson, what are you going to do with the tandem sling seating benches that were at the airport? Are some of the materials and such that could be reused elsewhere? Is there going to be any type of auction type component or anything like that?
There will actually be some of that sling seating will be reused, refinished and reused in different parts of the new terminal. But that's a great question about additional inventory. I think we should. I think that's a great idea. Maybe we'll come to you guys first and see who wants what. But when we were closing Terminal A, I know that I was certainly interested in getting my hands on some components. My airline background for a little bit included working at AirTran Airways, so I fought for, but eventually lost some AirTran signage that I was trying to get to.
Very
Those
good.
Eames chairs are fabulous. I want like a row of 3, please, for the little newbie
Same here.
thing. And your idea of coming to us facility managers, the KCI group first, is also a fabulous idea.
Yeah, a lot of interest in reuse. From Mary Redmond, and this speaks to the topic that you touched upon briefly, the COVID. Even though the contracted resources seem to be keeping pace and you're on track, have you experienced any issues with obtaining raw materials? Manufacturing glitches, so to speak.
I'm looking for things to knock on. We have been unbelievably lucky on the project so far. So as you know, Canada, our neighbors to the north, have been very careful about allowing U.S. citizens into Canada, and have actually really gone a step further into locking things down. All of our steel came from Canada, and our last piece of steel showed up in the same week that Canada was saying we're really gonna lock things down now. So we kind of got through that one on the hair of our chinny chin chins, but no other major issues regarding procurement of materials so far. In fact, we're because the pandemic has really caused a lot of airport projects to pump the brakes, and yet ours has had airline support to keep it moving forward. Things like passenger boarding bridges and other airport specific materials, airport terminal specific materials, are actually going to be a little bit easier for us to procure because there are fewer airports in the market for that kind of material right now than there were before.
Very good. Let's see, we have another question here. Just confirming from Amy Bosman, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Did we hear that the new terminal will eventually replace the 2 older terminals? I believe that was the case, but I just want to confirm.
Yeah, that's correct. As I mentioned, they're really at the end of their life. 50 years of exposed aggregate concrete they're done.
Makes sense to me.
I did just drop a time lapse in the chat box if anybody wants to.
Oh, great.
Pop that open in the browser. I think it was just the month of January, so a lot of snow, but a little bit of a visual for you to look at your own time there.
Very good. Well, I believe that addresses the questions from the chat area. We did have a few questions that we wanted to pose as well. And I think we might have discussed those in pre-programming session. What do you have in the way of examples for sustainability elements that were added to the project or were decided upon for energy efficiencies, et cetera, things that you might want to highlight?
Thanks for asking that. The project has a commitment to build to LEED Gold standards. That's a city commitment across all newly constructed city managed facilities. So that's us. We've done quite a bit of work just on those requirements, but we're also looking to do some things that are a little bit over and above. We're working with Evergy on looking for opportunities for solar. Right now, we've identified maybe the south-facing side of that 6,000 space parking garage, as we could make almost a vertical solar farm there. So there's an opportunity to do that. There's also just a lot in terms of, it's not necessarily the environmental impact, but just really when it comes to technology. Technology changes so fast, you guys, so fast. And this is a project that from vote in 2017 to opening in 2023, that it covers a significant period of time where the technology that was available to us in 2017 will be out of date by 2023. And so there's a lot of things that we still haven't even made final decisions on yet when it comes to technology, because of the knowledge that it's going to change. So we didn't want to make a decision on what kind of boarding technology we'll have at the gates. We didn't want to make that decision in 2017 or 2018. We want to make that decision in 2021 and 2022. Because when 2017, if I told you that we might want to have technology where you could board an aircraft without a boarding pass, or a scan off your phone or whatever, just because we could use facial scanning technology that was there, everyone would have lost their minds. But now we're in 2021, and I would guess that probably 70% of you on this call can in fact open your phone by just looking at it, right? So technology changes really, really fast. And so we're really, I'm proud of the team for holding off on some of those decisions, because I think we'll end up with a better product in the end, just because we kind of kept our powder dry and made those decisions towards the end.
Very good.
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
One more question that came in on the chat line from Ken Scott regarding the minority small business efforts to spread the work around. His question is, are they mostly local, or are they coming from outside the city?
And that's the construction workers?
Yeah.
Right. So the majority of the work, 85% of the people on the job site are from the greater Kansas City region. So defining that MSA that the U.S. Census Bureau uses, the workforce is Kansas City. And most of the material, some of the material like the jet bridges, there's not a jet bridge manufacturer in Kansas City, so that's going out. But when it comes to a lot of the trades, the concrete work has been done locally. The steel, I mentioned the steel came in from out of country, but it was installed locally. So there's, again, like 85% of the workforce is Kansas Cityans that are getting this job done.
Just noted, we have another question here regarding the procurement for vendors from Linda Ath, I believe.
I see that about barbecue vendors. Yeah.
Only one barbecue vendor.
I don't know. Maybe we'll have 8. I don't know. That there is certainly not a limit on that. One of the things that's interesting, and I mentioned this as I was racing through those slides, was how today, if you're limited to the concessions that are in your gate area, and how inefficient that is, and not desirable that is for a customer service perspective. But one of the things that it's forced us to do is create the same amenity in a whole bunch of different locations. To that end, I would imagine most of you would be surprised to know that we actually have 8 Starbucks inside terminals B and C. 8. We don't need 8. Like in the new terminal, we certainly don't need 8 coffee shops. But the way that everything is so individually isolated in the existing facility has forced us to do things like that. So even if you just think about taking the existing concessions program into a facility like we're constructing, it will allow us to take those, half of those coffee shops and do something else, and do something that's different. So we will have a lot of ability to do things in a more efficient and better way. And I would actually love for there to be multiple choices on the barbecue side for our travelers to enjoy.
Very good. Well, I have one question that I've kind of cooked up as your presentation rolled on, and then I'll turn it over to anybody else in the group that might have anything to throw out there. Facility management. Quite often we receive projects at the end of the construction, especially very large projects, billion-dollar projects. What have you done in the way of planning for cyclic maintenance and procurement of the maintenance of the facility and the budgets necessary to support this wonderful endeavor that you guys will be finishing up here before long?
I will share something that will most likely create shock and horror to most of your group, and that is that prior to 2016, maybe it was even in 2018, the aviation department did not have an active in-use asset management system, inventory management. We turned on Maximo a couple of years ago in the existing facility, just so we could kind of learn how to use the tool, in the thought that it will be our guiding light in the new facility. So we've, on the technology side, we've kind of understood what we needed to do and it moved in favorably in that direction. In terms of facility management individuals being engaged in the project, I'm actually really pleased to share that from the very beginning, we've had all of our work groups and leadership from all of our work groups engaged on the process. So, you know, when it comes to the procurement for escalators and elevators, you know, we've got the facility managers that we have today in those meetings asking questions about, you know, what's exactly in the maintenance package and what kind of guarantees are there and what kind of attic stock are we talking about. So all of that has been considered, and I think we're in a pretty good place there, Robert, on the way that's been done. One of the things that I think that I'm personally excited about is the engagement in those individuals, even in some of our unique and new amenities that we haven't had before. Things like multiple rooms for nursing parents and multiple service animal relief areas and multiple sensory rooms for travelers or parents that might have a small traveler that's on the autism spectrum. We're doing a lot of new amenities that will actually be, I think, put us in the upper echelon of inclusivity when it comes to what we're looking to do with this new terminal. So we've had, you know, I mentioned that just because I remember the conversation we had about what kind of adult changing tables we needed to get in, the conversation of some of our facility managers about what's the durability and how, you know, what kind of wall mounting structure is there to those specific kind of things. So that's what made that come to mind. But I'm excited about the engagement that we've had from so many of our frontline workers to make sure that this is a facility that is going to be one that will be easy to work with and work around. And I'll tell you a little story, Robert. I was in back in the days when we traveled, I was in Newark Airport in 2019 getting ready for an international departure, and they had just finished a bathroom remodel, a restroom remodel in Newark. And for this project, I'm kind of the guy that's crazy about the bathroom. So I'm every airport I go in, I'm looking at, you know, what kind of sinks do they have and where's the location of the paper towels, or do they have, you know, what kind of soap dispensers or what's going on. So I go in there and it's always kind of weird because I want to take pictures, but taking pictures in the restroom is kind of sketch. So you got to always kind of wait until it's cleared out. And this particular restroom was cleared out with the exception of a janitor who was behind me. And so I took a couple pictures of the way that they had the doors hinged and they had little privacy markers on the doors, but it was really small. You couldn't really see green or red. So it's I'm like, what's the point? You almost have to stand right at the door to look at to figure out whether or not it's locked or unlocked. So I took that back as something let's not use something like this because it's not really sensical. And I turned around to the janitor and I spoke with him a little bit about how did he like cleaning the facility and what did they get right and what did they get wrong. And he said the thing that they got wrong was the soap. And I said, well, how is the soap wrong? He said, every single sink has its own individual dispenser. And the only way to access the soap dispenser is for him to lie on his back underneath the sink and unscrew it, fill it up, and screw it back in again. And he said that's his full-time job. His full-time job is to lie on his back in a dirty airport bathroom and replace soap dispensers. So there's a lot of things like that we can learn if we're willing to ask the right questions to make sure that the people in our facility get the same kind of benefits that we're looking to deliver for the guests in our facility.
Well, they're very fortunate to have you on their team, and as well to the lessons learned type things, picking up some tips from those who have to maintain a wealth of information to be had. With that being said, anybody else have anything they want to toss out there? Josh, you got anything?
There was one more question that came in on the chat regarding the concessions again. Will HMS Services remain the provider for shops and concessions?
So they're open to bid. The entire project is open. There's some large national well-known vendors like the one we currently have now. I expect them to rebid. We'll see where that goes. But as it's an open RFP, there's not a lot of color commentary I can provide on who's likely to be participating in that RFP.
And then just one more. Can you talk a little bit about the security from the parking garage perspective, being so close to the main entrance of the terminal? Yeah,
and there are some design requirements and rules and regs on blast distance, to be quite honest. So we've worked with the TSA and the FAA and the FBI in the design concept to make sure that those distances were met. It's things you hate to talk about, right? But the glass that will be on the glazing on the that will be the east facing side of the head house, the area where you're walking into from the road. That's all will all be blast rated material, and we'll have all that stuff like bollards now to keep vehicles off of roadways, and you hate to think about it, but we've considered all of those requirements and safety considerations for the new terminal design.
Looks like Sam Davidson has a observation to make real quick.
I just wanted to say to Justin and everyone to put this together, especially the programs committee, that they did a fabulous job. It's really great to see this. I've been around IFMA Kansas City for a really long time, and we always get to tour these facilities when they're first open. Hopefully we get to do that. We get through COVID in this spring, and we possibly get to do that, because the tours were always the highlights for me, being a 38-year facility manager. And also your observations about the maintenance aspect of it. Sometimes in the visioning and the planning sessions, they lose track of the day-to-day maintenance that is required for these things. And your observation, I'm sorry, Jason Kaiser, because you sold these to me, but they did design the same way in our bathrooms. The only way that you can change the automatic soap dispensers is by laying on your back and reaching up and screwing this bottle in and then unscrewing the bottle in. And luckily we're not doing this in an airport, but we're doing it at a 200-person facility, and that is difficult. And sometimes during the design, the visioning, the planning, I don't think they really think these things out. I mean, they look great on paper, and when they're drawn, they look really good. You can even ask the construction trades. They'll draw up something, and then it's like, how are we going to build this? You didn't talk to the drywall guys. This doesn't work. We can't build it this way. So hopefully there was a lot of that type of facility involvement in the beginning and during the planning, so that you don't have some of the headaches that we as day-to-day facility managers run into on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. It's just frustrating, but it looks like a fabulous airport, and I can't wait to see it. I can remember I was a teenager, just the little wooden rails, and you could literally just walk between those gaps in them and just go all over the place in the original airport. because I'm old enough to being able to fly in and out of there in the early 70s. And it's amazing that it was allowed, but I just think it was a great presentation. And I just want to do one more quick announcement that I didn't get in at the beginning. Todd didn't see my hand raised. Just for everybody, I know there's 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of snow. There's more tomorrow. It's -19, or I don't know, wherever you're at. But the golf committee did decide on a date for the golf outing. It's going to be June 8th, and we selected a course. It's going to be at Deer Creek. That's a Tuesday. And we're planning for a 9 a.m. shotgun start. So just something warm and fun to think about on this kind of cold and dreary and bleary winter's day. So that's all for me. Thank
Sam,
you, Justin.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate those words. And if I can respond to one of the things, I'm sure there will still be things, of course, that end up being things that we got wrong, and trying to minimize those is certainly the goal. One of the best practices that we've taken from other airports that have opened, one of the things that Salt Lake, which opened a new terminal recently, Salt Lake advised us to do was actually go through the full construction of some of our critical areas that are going to be repeated, just so we can make sure that it's exactly the way we want it. So we'll actually, on the south end of the B concourse, be soup to nuts finishing one of the restroom cores in the terminal, and we'll have the opportunity to go in and figure out, does this work? Are the hand dryers in the right place? Are the soap dispensers right? Do the doors, when the doors are swung out, is there still enough walkable space? It will give us a chance to kind of just make sure, test drive perhaps, and make sure that we got it right before we're all in. And if there's a change order, rather than it costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe it's only tens of thousands of dollars to make some of those adjustments. So we're certainly grateful to our friends at Salt Lake City for passing along that airport construction tip that we're gonna use to our advantage.
Well, as a facility manager, I find myself doing the exact same thing you said you were doing. You were walking around and looking at things. I mean, you're always looking at the building and then looking at the bathrooms and the way they're done. And my significant other used to just hate it, because all I ever did was talk about, well, look at that. Isn't that cool building over there? And it's great that the doors swing out when you're coming out of the bathrooms. That way you don't have to touch the doors. And I mean, it's just like, would you please stop mansplaining stuff to me? I don't want to hear it anymore.
Hey, Justin, it looks like there's one more question in the chat box from Greg. Greg, do you want to go ahead and unmute your mic and ask the question?
Just in line with this topic of thinking about the space before it's finally built, I had heard that they were using a lot of BIM modeling to kind of build out the space virtually first.
Yeah, and that's true. So our architect, the primary architect for the project is SOM. They've done some other, Skidmore, Owings, Merrill. They've done some other airport terminal projects and have been a great partner with us so far. And there has been opportunities for us to virtually walk through BIM modeling different parts of the project while we were talking about, is this room big enough, or is there enough space between the end of the security checkpoint and the primary hallway, or the location of the information desk that'll be in the space near the elevators? Should it be closer to the elevators and escalators, or further away? So we've been able to, in a virtual world through BIM modeling, move some things around to walk through the facility before it's constructed, which has been pretty cool.
With that being said, are there any other questions that anybody has that has popped up? No? All right, well, I'm going to take my programs hat off and put my membership hat on. And during this meeting, as you all logged on, you were assigned numbers. And one of the things that Membership Appreciation does is the chapter purchased a Topgolf gift card. So Calistro, you are the winner today of the Topgolf giveaway. And so with that comes up to 5 people plus yourself, so 6 total. a gift card from the chapter and or sponsor, and I will get that over to you ASAP. If there are still not any other questions, Todd, I will turn it over to you and let you wrap this up and gift you guys back 15 minutes of your day.
Thanks, Ash. Thanks again, members and guests, and thank you to our presenter today. This was a great presentation. Thank you very much. I don't really have any other announcements. I look forward to seeing everybody next month for our March program. And stay warm, everybody. Take care.
Thank you again, Justin. It was really great. I really appreciate everything you did.
Yeah, it was wonderful to meet with you all. And I just dropped it in the chat, but I would love to coordinate a tour with you all in 2022, bring you out to see the facility. So
We would love that.
put that
Look
on
at
the calendar.
look at all these FMs turning on their cameras and clapping their hands. The word
Yeah.
tour gets them excited.
Let's do it. Sounds great.
Great job, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.